Hello YouTube, Dave here again. I've been a collector for Dungeons & Dragons since about 2003, so it's going on about 15 years at this point when I actually seriously started wanting to collect stuff for the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game. I've been playing since 1999, but I was serious about wanting to actually amass a collection of books around that time, so around 2003, shortly before the release of D&D 3.5. Over the years, since I started this channel, I have had people ask me some collecting tips or some advice, and I've generally answered these in like emails or messages on my Facebook page or even messages on my YouTube channel. But what I really want to do is maybe create a series of videos with just some ideas. Now, I don't consider myself to be the definitive source of information on how to collect or collecting strategies or anything like that. I'm really not. I mean, I don't consider myself to be the definitive source on anything, but I can at least provide what I consider to be some helpful pieces of advice or some guidelines or just some things to at least keep in mind as you begin your journey to, collecting whatever it might be. For the purposes of this series, I'm going to be focusing primarily on Dungeons & Dragons, but these advice or these tips can apply to any types of like role-playing games or even things such as like video games, comics, books, DVDs, video games, just about anything. I think I've already said video games, but anyway. So the first thing that I want to do with this video is just talking about getting started. And, getting started is kind of one of the more difficult aspects when it comes to collecting, because there's a lot of things that I think you should have in mind before you start collecting. The first thing that you want to have an idea is what do you want to start collecting? And why do you want to start collecting those things? So, for me, I think that it's important that if you're going to collect something, it should be something that you are passionate about, something that has some significance to you, and it should never be something that I want to collect this stuff because, I want to, flip my collection and make money. There are people that do that, and if that's what you're interested in, or if, for you collecting is all about just, buying and selling, then I guess that's one thing. But for me, I consider collecting to be, a hobby. It's something that I enjoy doing. And for me, I want to collect something, again, that I care about, that I'm passionate about, and that's something that means something to me. Early on, when I first started collecting, or before I even got into collecting at all, at first I thought I was maybe going to collect video games, but I never really kind of got into that. I mean, I have a decent amount of, video games that I have on my shelf, but I never considered myself to be a video game collector. I thought about collecting coins at one point. I actually had a little bit of a coin collection going. I had a vintage Canadian money collection going for a while. And it just, again, wasn't really something that interested me. So when I got like the older $100 bills and $50 bills, I just kind of used them and got rid of them because, again, it was just sitting there. It wasn't something that I was passionate about. But when it came to Dungeons and Dragons, I started to find that I liked having these books sitting on the shelf, and I enjoyed looking at them, and I enjoyed seeing my little shelf that was on my desk just kind of start to expand and expand and expand with these D&D books. It started with the 2nd edition Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook, and then moved on to the 3.0 core rule books, and then I started getting things like Monsters of Faerun was the next book that I got after that, and then I ended up getting, I think it was Races of Faerun, and Monster Manual 2, and I got the D&D Adventure game for 3rd edition, and it just started to seem like this nice collection, and that's when I decided that that's what I want to do. I love Dungeons & Dragons. It means the world to me. It didn't mean as much to me personally back then as it was going to, just in a few years. But it's still something that I enjoy doing, and for me it felt like a practical thing to collect. My idea was that I was going to collect, 3rd edition, and when they announced 3.5, I was going to collect 3.5 because I could use all of those books. So that's why I started doing it. The reason that I continued to do it is, and go beyond the editions that I was playing, for me was I just wanted to, learn more about D&D's history. Like, I had all these friends that I was hanging out with that had played since, the basic D&D or D&D Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition, or even 0 edition. I mean, one of my best friends is the individual that I bought most of those 0 edition books off of. So for me, it was just I wanted to start to learn the history and kind of see the changes in D&D from the earliest days to the current stuff. So it's just one of those things that's kind of why I started doing it. For me, it's never been about wanting to get a collection of valuable books and sell them off, because truth be told, the D&D books don't necessarily hold their value. There are a few books in my collection that are probably worth around the same or maybe even marginally more than I did pay for them originally, but it's kind of few and far between, so I really can't honestly say that this is something that's going to be a big source of income if I decide to sell it, because personally I never plan on selling these books, and that's a video that I addressed earlier. So it's just one thing that you should really sit down and think about before you start collecting anything, because you're not going to enjoy buying stuff for a collection if you don't really care about what it is that you're doing. Like I said, I tried to collect money, and it was cool to look at, but I didn't care. Honestly, it was like, well, this is neat. It's the older paper $100 bills from back in the 70s or 80s, and it's like, yeah, they look nice, but what am I going to do with them? Am I going to enjoy looking at them every day? Or am I just going to be sitting there and thinking that, between the 20, the 50, and the $100 bill, I've got $170 just sitting there that I could actually buy something I care about with. And that's what ended up happening. So make sure it's something that you're passionate about. And when it comes to, so at this point I want to talk about specifically Dungeons and Dragons. So if you want to decide to start collecting for D&D, or I guess any role-playing game, that's great. Starting out, you have to have an idea of what it is you want to focus your attentions on. So that's something else that I want to talk about in this video, is just setting early collecting goals for yourself and making those goals somewhat realistic or somewhat more easily attainable. So for example, with me, when I started collecting, I was just collecting everything that was current, because I figure I can use these for D&D campaigns. I can use these to make adventures with, I can use these to make NPCs with, or my players could use these books to make stuff or to pull resources for their player characters. And if you want to start, if 5th edition D&D, for example, is where you're first breaking into the role-playing game genre and hobby, then wanting to have a collection of D&D 5th edition books is a completely easily obtainable and perfectly natural goal to look to. And so you could say, I want to go back and get, the core books, I want to get the supplements, and I want to go and get all of the adventures. I want to get an entire 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons collection. It's a great place to start. It's current, so everything's in print. Everything's going to be easy to come by. You can go to your local game store. You can go to like big chain bookstores and find all of these items. So that is, again, a realistic goal. It's an easy goal. And when you start collecting, I think it's important to have some minor goals that you can kind of set yourself towards before you get, overwhelmed or you just feel like nothing's happening. So, for example, if your initial collecting goal was to collect everything for, Dungeons and Dragons from 0 edition up until 5th edition, it's going to be kind of difficult to do that from the beginning. It's something that, if you're looking to get all the 1st edition AD&D books, you might be able to find them on eBay, which is something that we'll talk about in a future video. But at the same time, it's not going to be the easiest thing to do. And it could be something that becomes frustrating. Like if you just want to set out and get all of these things from all these different editions, you're really spreading your focus out way too far. And it might end up seeming kind of difficult or ungratifying, because you look on your shelf and it's like, hey, I can get all kinds of 5th edition stuff because that's easy to come by, and it's like, oh hey, I got the 3.5 Player's Handbook because those are kind of more easy to come by, or at least the Pathfinder stuff might be. So again, that's something else that would be easy to come by. But going back and trying to find like 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, trying to find 1st edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is kind of difficult depending on the way that you do it. So you could be, go out, I'm going to collect D&D, you say, buy a bookshelf, you have, 5 shelves, 1 shelf for 5th, 1 for 4th, 1 for 3rd, 1 for 2nd, 1 for 1st, and it just sits largely empty because you're spread out way too far. So the thing that I would say is focus on, if you're going to collect a role-playing game, focus on a particular maybe edition of the role-playing game. Something that would be easy to come by, at least to start. This is just the beginning, like this is just the earliest days of your collecting. This isn't something that you're going to have to stick to for the entirety of your collecting life. But to start off with, you want to have sort of a sense of satisfaction early on that you actually did something. And that's a big part of collecting. A major part of collecting is just psychological. And, being able to look at something and feel a sense of accomplishment. So have those early small goals. If you're looking to get into Dungeons and Dragons, maybe getting a 5th edition collection would be the best way to go about starting things. And then you can progress from there. But small goals, something that's relatively simple to do. If you want to branch out to different editions of, say, D&D, then my suggestion would be to stick to a particular thing, like I want to get the Player's Handbook for 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3.0, 3.5, 4th, and then 5th. That's something that would be relatively simple to do. That's 6 books right there. That's all you need to try to find. And then after you get the Player's Handbooks, you can say, all right, now I want to find the Dungeon Master's Guide for 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd, 3.5, 4th, and then finally 5th. Or you may already have the 5th edition stuff. But just start with something simple like that so that you can actually, again, feel a sense of accomplishment. So again, that's sort of just the basic stuff, the things you want to kind of have in mind as you're about to begin your collecting journey. So why are you doing it? What are you going to collect? What does your collection mean to you? So I guess the last part, what your collection means to you. Why my D&D collection means so much to me isn't just because I love the game. Isn't just because of the fact that, I've been able to build this up over the years. It's the reason that it means so much to me now. Like before, it was just learning D&D's history, which was, well enough and fine and a perfectly valid reason to want to collect the stuff. But now my collection represents, something very, very deeply personal to me. I mentioned in the video further back, if you watch my, D&D and depression video, I honestly owe the fact that I'm standing here today making these videos to Dungeons and Dragons. There were times where I was just so depressed with my life and the way that things were going, and my goals coming out of high school versus where I was in reality, and it just felt so insurmountable that honestly there were times that I was going to give up and I just wanted out, and I just didn't want to be part of this anymore. I just wanted to not exist, basically. And the thing that kept me going was D&D. So for me, this collection represents the fact that these books helped me get through the darkest and toughest period of my life, and that's why I collect them now. Before it was just, hey, these are kind of cool looking books. They didn't really mean necessarily as much to me. Back then, I probably wouldn't have been as adverse to, selling some of these off. In fact, I had purchased a couple of books that I ended up giving to a buddy of mine that I kind of wish I had now. But, for me, again, D&D is a game that I love. It's a hobby that I enjoy, and it's honestly saved my life. And it's why I'm here today. So that's why I collect. So that's a major important question you have to ask when you first start. And the other thing is, again, just to keep your early collecting goals simple. The easiest thing to do is to go for the current stuff, the stuff that is readily available in print, to build that up, and then you can look at branching out afterwards. So I hope this video has sort of been helpful for anyone that's looking to potentially get into collecting. And again, this can apply to anything. These pieces of advice that I mentioned today don't have to be specific to just collecting D&D, or even just collecting role-playing games. If you are interested in stuff like retro video games, maybe something like when I grew up, the NES and the Super Nintendo were my main consoles as a kid. So if I were to get into collecting retro games, those are probably the systems that would mean something to me. But that's just way too expensive for me to try to get into nowadays. But again, you can sort of use that to really focus on anything. Just, have those few things in mind, collect something that you care about, collect something that means something to you, that you're passionate about, and be realistic early on. So I hope, again, you found this video helpful. I hope you enjoyed it so far. I'm going to do a series of these videos. So the next video that I'm going to publish tomorrow is going to focus on how to actually start going about collecting, like where to go, what resources to use. So I'm going to be looking at that tomorrow. So again, hope you come back for that one. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time.